Welcome to the Market Decoder, your go-to podcast for digestible market insights. Join us as we deep dive into the latest trends, uncover valuable insights, and share expert perspectives you won't find anywhere else. Today we're diving deep into something most of us can't live without: coffee, especially the global coffee supply chain. It's pretty wild lately, and we've seen some huge price swings, especially throughout 2024 and into 2025.
And then those new US tariffs landed in April 2025, adding another layer.
Exactly. So, to really get a handle on this, we went through a lot of material: market reports, articles, industry news.
And our mission, as always, is simple: cut through that noise. We will give you the essentials on why things are changing in the coffee world and what it means for everyone, from the farmer growing the beans to us right here needing that morning cup. So, where's the best place to start to make sense of all of this volatility?
I think we absolutely have to start with the journey itself: how coffee gets from the plant to your cup. And it's quite a trip.
The bean to cup journey laid out for us.
Okay, so first up is cultivation and harvesting. Coffee plants take time, like 4 to 7 years, before you even start producing properly. Most of the world's coffee, especially the good stuff, the Arabica, comes from small farms, often just 1 or 2 hectares, family run. So small holders are the key. And a lot of the harvesting is still done by hand, picking only the ripe red cherries.
Manual labor. That sounds like it could be a bottleneck.
It definitely can be, especially with labor shortages in some regions. It makes the first step really sensitive to disruption. This affects supply, affects price right from the start. So next is processing. This is where they actually get the bean from the fruit. There are basically three main ways to do it, and these methods hugely affect the taste. You've got wet processing, using lots of water for washing and fermenting, which gives you that clean, bright, acidic taste. It's common where water's plentiful.
Okay, so wet processing for brightness.
Then there's dry processing. You dry the whole cherry, usually in the sun. This often results in fuller body, sweeter, fruitier notes, and is used in drier areas. The third one is honey processing. It's kind of in between. They leave some of the sticky fruit pulp on the bean while it dries, and this can add sweetness and complexity.
Honey, interesting. So these are behind those descriptions on the coffee bag.
Exactly. It's amazing how much difference it makes.
Okay, so processed beans, then what?
Next is exporting, which involves trading and export. Traders often buy the processed beans, they call it parchment coffee, and at this stage from farmers or co-op. They bundle it up, consolidate it, then the exporters handle the international side. So logistics, regulations, getting it sold to buyers overseas. They're the bridge in the global market.
Navigating the complexities. Okay, it lands in, let's say, the US. Then who takes over that?
That's importers. They physically get the green beans into the consuming country, dealing with customs and transport. Then you have the suppliers or brokers. They buy from the importers, often in bulk, and sell it to roasters, building those relationships.
Okay, so now green beans arrive at the roaster.
This is where the magic happens. This is where the flavor we know really develops. Roasting and packaging involves heating those green beans, carefully controlling time and temperature to get the specific taste profile. It's an art and a science. Then maybe grinding and finally packaging it up.
Okay, we're almost there. How does it get from the roaster onto the shelf or into the cafe?
Distribution in retail, getting it to supermarkets, coffee shops, online stores, everywhere we buy it, through wholesalers, delivery trucks, and the whole network. And of course, e-commerce is huge now. So there's a lot more choice.
And the final step?
Of course, that's consumption. That's us enjoying the end result of that long journey. It really is a global supply chain.
Yeah, and you mentioned the key players. Can we just quickly list them again?
Sure. Well, you've got the growers, who are the foundations, the processors, prepping the beans, intermediaries connecting growers and exporters, the exporters doing the international trade deals, the importers getting it into the country, suppliers and brokers who sell it to roasters, the roasters creating the final product, and the retailers selling it to us.
Wow, it's a whole ecosystem. So now for the bean itself, what do we need to know? Are there different species?
Good question. There are two main species that dominate coffee. Arabica, that's most of the world's coffee, more complex in flavor, less caffeine, your typical specialty coffee. And then there's coffee caniphora, which is usually just called Robusta. Stronger, more bitter taste, more caffeine. It's tougher and easier to grow.
And where do we find Robusta usually?
Well, very common in espresso blends, gives you that crema and kick and a lot of instant coffee as well.
Got it. So Arabica for nuance, Robusta for punch. Okay. Now let's dive into the turbulence, those big price hikes in 2024, 25. What was going on there?
Oh, it was dramatic. Arabica futures on the C market in New York shot past $4 a pound in early 2025. First time ever. That was like 25% jump since the start of the year and a whopping 70% rise over 2024. And Robusta futures on Life in London hit record highs too. The ICO's indicator price, that's kind of global average, hit a record high in Feb 2025, up over 14% in just 1 month.
Okay, these weren't small fluctuations. What drove them?
It was really a perfect storm, a bunch of things hitting at once. Adverse weather was a huge factor. Brazil, the biggest producer, had a bad drought. Then frost hit in August 2024 and really damaged the crop potential. Then Vietnam, the number two producer for Robusta, they had an unusually bad drought in October 2024. Exports dropped, and then Indonesia too. They had way too much rain through 2023 and into 2024, damaged the coffee cherries and cut production.
So, major weather issues in key spots. Climate awareness striking again. What else was in that perfect storm?
Well, supply chain disruptions, big ones. So the first one is, of course, the Red Sea conflict, for instance. That's a major shipping route, handling loads of coffee from Asia. We heard about ships being rerouted, around Africa, adding weeks to the journey, huge cost increase, and affected maybe 30% of global container traffic. So a big impact.
Yeah, so we also have the geopolitics messing with coffee deliveries.
And initially, there was some hoarding, right? So companies getting nervous about availability, buying up stock, then tightening things further.
Okay, so weather, shipping problems, these are on the supply side. What about demand? Were people drinking more coffee as well?
Yes, so rise in global demand definitely played a part, especially in emerging markets. Asia's consumption is booming. China is a prime example of that. Their coffee drinking has increased over 150% in the last 10 years, and they're forecasted to hit 6.3 million bags by the end of 2025.
Wow, 150%. Plus, coffee is getting more popular with younger folks globally, and more people are brewing at home, just like you and I. So, supply down, demand up. Classic recipe for price hikes. Any market games involved, like speculation?
Oh, yeah, so market speculation and low inventories. When prices started rising, financial speculators jumped in, betting that they'd go even higher, taking on bullish positions, and that added fuel to the fire. Plus, there were real concerns about how low the actual coffee stocks were, especially in Brazil, and that made the market really jittery.
And what about costs on the farm?
Well, as you know, there are rising production costs everywhere, right? So, farming coffee is labor intensive, so many regions face shortages as young people leave agriculture, and that pushes up wages and farming costs.
Okay, so a whole mess of factors. We have weather, shipping, demand, speculation costs, all pushing prices up.
Exactly, a confluence of events.
Well, you mentioned the coffee C market and life before. These are the big exchanges, I guess.
They are the C market on ice in New York for Arabica and life in London for Robusta. These are the global benchmarks, and they work on future contracts. agreements to buy or sell at a set price for a future date. The price is driven by supply and demand fundamentals, but also by expectations, like news about the Brazil frost. They're forward looking, right? So news about weather, economic shifts, even changes in tastes, it all feeds into those future prices instantly. Highly sensitive markets.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's pivot to those US tariffs from April 2025. What exactly did the US government roll out that's relevant to this?
So in April 2025, the US brought in tariffs on coffee imports, well, no, all imports from quite a few key countries. It started with a sort of blanket 10% tariff on most places.
Yeah, 10% across the board initially.
Yeah, and then they announced even higher reciprocal tariffs for countries where they felt there was a trade imbalance.
Yeah, remind us which countries got hit hard.
Vietnam was a big one, slapped with 46% tariff. Remember, they're the world's top Robusta producer. And Indonesia got hit with 32%. They're crucial for certain specialty coffee. So, very significant hikes for those two.
46% sounds massive. What was the reaction in industry globally?
Well, a lot of concern naturally. Industry groups spoke out, trade partners weren't happy. Then, pretty quickly, the US announced a 90-day pause on those higher reciprocal tariffs for most countries. So for that period, it mostly reverted back to the baseline 10%, but coffee from China still faces much higher tariffs, and those weren't paused.
Right, so China was a separate case, but for Vietnam, Indonesia, Brazil, Colombia, back to 10% temporarily.
Temporarily, yes. But even that 10% adds cost, obviously.
So, what are the implications even at 10%?
Well, even 10% makes coffee more expensive for US buyers, and it all trickles down eventually.
How did the actual coffee market react to all this back and forth? The announcement, then the pause.
It was really jumpy. When the higher reciprocal tariffs were first announced, green coffee prices actually dropped sharply, like 60 cents a pound.
Oh, it dropped. Interesting. Why is that?
The thinking was probably the US roasters would force those costs back to the sellers, the green bean suppliers, pushing the price down at origin.
Interesting. So, what happened when the pause was confirmed?
Well, prices bounced right back up again, recovered a lot of that lost. It just shows how sensitive the market is to this policy stuff.
Yeah, lots of uncertainty. So, even with the pause, this could still change where the US gets its coffee long term.
Oh, absolutely. It's likely prompting a rethink. Vietnam might look towards Europe, maybe where tariffs are a little bit different, while US buyers might look elsewhere. African coffee, for example, might face lower baseline tariffs, making them more attractive. Or perhaps Colombian wash Arabicas start looking like a better value compared to tariff hit Vietnam Robusta.
So, US importers and roasters, they're probably reevaluating their whole sourcing strategy right now.
You have to assume so, yes. These tariffs, even pause, could definitely reshape trade flows over time.
Okay, so we've got high bean prices, we've got these new tariffs. What's the ripple effect? How are regular consumers and coffee businesses actually feeling this?
Well, consumers are definitely seeing higher costs. It's unavoidable, really. The combo of expensive green bean plus tariffs on top, it means higher prices at the checkout and at the cafe. Report shows some coffee shops are hiking prices up to 50 cents a cup pretty quickly. And the average price for ground coffee in the US hit a record high in early 2025, over $7 a pound.
$7 a pound on the average? Wow.
And this is likely to stick around, given the tariffs are still there, even at 10%, and the underlying bean prices are volatile.
Yeah, higher prices seem probable for a while. So, will people just drink less coffee or switch types?
That's the question. We could see reduced demand, maybe people cutting back or switching to cheaper instant coffee or lower grades, and brands relying on beans from, say, Vietnam, they might struggle if they have to pass on big price increases. We could even see more interesting coffee alternatives, chicory blends, things like that, if coffee gets too pricey for some.
What about the businesses themselves, like roasters, cafes must be tough for them?
It really is. Challenges for roasters and retailers are significant. Margins are already thin, so absorbing bean costs and tariffs is really hard. So they have to pass it on mostly. And there's price pressures too, right? They're worried about losing consumers. Some might adjust the menus, maybe drop the really expensive single origins, and the sheer uncertainty of everything makes planning a nightmare.
Yeah, tell us more about it. How are they adapting? What strategies are they trying?
Well, we'll have to see a few businesses adapt. Definitely looking at sourcing from different regions, ones with lower tariffs maybe, or lower base prices right now.
Okay, so diversifying supply.
Exactly. And maybe raising retail prices, often cautiously, maybe introducing smaller package sizes so the sticker shock is less bad, or focusing more on high margin specialty drinks or products to balance things out. It's really a juggling act.
Okay, so looking crystal ball time, what are the forecasts? Where are prices headed next?
Well, in the near and medium term, price forecasts are all over the place, frankly, which tells you how uncertain things are.
No clear consensus.
Not really. Some analysts suggest prices might ease later in 2025 and into 2026 if we get good weather. Bigger crops in Brazil and Vietnam would help.
That's a big if.
A very big if. A Reuters poll suggests that Arabica futures might drop about 30% by the end of 2025, assuming those bigger crops materialize. But others aren't so sure. Others expect continued volatility, maybe prices staying elevated because supplies are still very tight globally and inventories are low. And the weather is always a risk. Agriculture markets are just inherently unpredictable.
Okay, so near term is foggy. What about long term pressures?
Well, the long term impact is, of course, climate change. That's the elephant in the room for coffee. It's a huge concern. Projections suggest rising temperatures and changing rainfall could cut the land suitable for coffee by maybe 50% by 2050. 50% less land.
Wow, that's staggering.
It is, plus lower yields and more problems with pests and diseases like coffee leaf rust. It could change how coffee tastes. Big focus now is on climate resilient varieties, adaptive farming.
Yeah, that's critical for the future. Any other major long term trends we found?
Definitely the growth in emerging coffee markets. We mentioned China, but consumption is rising across Asia, which could mean higher prices if production doesn't keep up. And the policy, those tariffs, trade policy is a constant variable impacting costs and trade flows.
Yeah, sounds like a challenging future. Are there brighter spots, positive developments?
Well, yes, the whole push towards sustainability and innovation is crucial and growing.
Sustainability, what does that look like in coffee?
It covers a lot: fairer incomes for farmers, tackling child labor, preventing deforestation, climate change adaptation, reducing pesticides use, and managing water. Big issues. And there are certifications for this, like the Fair Trade or Rainforest Alliance, organic labels, plus new regulations like the EU Deforestation Rule, EUDR. They aim to drive better practices and give consumers some type of assurance.
Well, that's good to know. And technology, is that helping?
Technological innovations are popping up everywhere. So, smart farming using sensors and data on farms, developing those climate resilient plants, even smartphone apps for farmers.
What about after the farm?
Well, in processing, you see more automation, precision fermentation, better sorting machines using optics for tracking bean, things like blockchain, RFID tags, better software, even AI for assessing bean quality.
So, sustainability and tech working together.
Yeah, that will be the key interplay. Tech helps achieve sustainability goals. We have satellites to monitor forests, water saving tech and processing, precision tech to help use resources better, blockchain, we're using that to trace sustainable coffee. So, integrating all of this is vital. It's essential for building a coffee industry that's resilient to all these challenges, but also responsible. I think that's the future pathway for coffee.
Okay, this has been a really thorough deep dive. Let's try and wrap up the key takeaways.
Sounds good. So we've seen coffee prices go up, a real roller coaster driven by bad weather and tangled supply chains.
Yeah, and that new layer of US tariffs even paused as causing uncertainty shaking up trades, which means higher prices for us potentially changes what coffee is available and businesses scrambling to adapt.
And looking long term, climate change is a massive shadow over production, while demand keeps growing, especially in China and Asia. But there is positive momentum towards more sustainable practices helped along by new technology that focuses on sustainability and innovation is critical for the industry's future health and responsibility.
So here's a final thought for everyone listening. Next time you grab that coffee, maybe pause for a second. Think about that incredible journey, those global forces like weather, trade, climate, demand, and how it all connects back to your cup, your choices, and maybe the bigger picture of trade and our planet. It's definitely more than just a drink.
Very well said, and definitely a lot to chew on, or rather, sip on. We'll see you next time. The content provided is for informational and educational purposes only. The opinions expressed by the hosts and guests are their own and do not reflect the views of any affiliated organizations or institutions. Investing involves risks, including the potential loss of principal. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Listeners are encouraged to conduct their own research, consult with qualified financial advisors before making any financial decisions. The information shared is based on current market trends and data available at the time of recording and may change over time.